Salams and welcome to a brand new episode of Daily Debrief coming to you from the People's Dispatch studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani, and on the show today we try to understand the unfolding political crisis in the United Kingdom, the prospects for lasting peace in Colombia, and a landmark decision on equal pay for equal work in New Zealand. First up, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government is teetering after a series of senior ministers resigned overnight and through the day. The struggling Conservative Party leader desperately hangs on to his chair and whatever little political future he may have. Labour Chief Keir Starmer termed the wave of ministerial resignations, headlined by Chancellor to the Exchequer Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid, as well as Tory Vice Chair Bim Afalami, as the charge of the lightweight brigade, and said those ministers still holding their jobs are a Z list of nodding dogs. The list of resignations is growing as we speak and now includes Environment Minister Joe Churchill, Home Office Minister Victoria Atkins, as well as John Glenn, Robin Walker, and Will Quince. A number of parliamentary private secretaries, who are essentially backbench MPs assisting ministers in their jobs, have also quit. Prashant joins us now for more on this developing story. Prashant, welcome back to Daily Debrief. Fun times in the House of Commons today, a lot going on, and Boris Johnson trying to seek support in the wave of what is of what is a wave of opposition from within his own party. And it's not just limited to Partygate this time, there's also other things that have come up. So what exactly is going on and what has Boris Johnson been up to?
Right, so Siddhant, we need to understand the two levels of crisis here. One is, of course, the crisis within the Conservative Party, which seems to be collapsing into itself. I mean, Boris Johnson has been having a very tenuous hold on power. He faced no confidence motion recently, just squeaked through, so to speak. And that was over the Partygate issue, where senior members of government were found to be partying during the time of COVID-19 restrictions. The latest scandal is about a deputy chief whip who was also a minister earlier, and the fact that despite the fact that there were allegations of sexual misconduct against him, he was nonetheless appointed as a minister and then the chief whip, deputy chief whip. The question was, did Boris Johnson know these allegations or not? He has changed his stance in various ways, but information reveals that these allegations are pretty much in the open. So this is the latest scandal to hit the party. At this point, of course, we need to realize that a lot of leaders are looking at this, seeing the PM in a weak position, now looking to sort of capitalize on this, take the high moral ground. So you have a spate of resignations, people calculating that if they resign now and come out strongly, they'll have a better chance in the next government in various ways, people looking at who will be the next prime minister, etc., etc. But all this is really the chaos within a party which is already bankrupt in terms of policies, in terms of what it can do for larger society. The Conservative Party is already bankrupt. And the true fact is that there is a much larger social crisis which is going on across the country, which the party has no real answers for. The party's only solution, Boris Johnson's only solution, and the solution of the next prime minister, whoever it's going to be, is going to be exactly the same. Cut public spending, do not raise salaries, do not do anything whereby the poor people have a better standard of living. So in that sense, this larger crisis of society is not something that this government is even willing to talk about, is willing to address. And the neglect or the refusal to address it is what is common to all the Conservative Party leaders and aspirants that are out there. So very unlikely, very unclear what's going to happen in the next few days. There are talks that there might be a challenge once again to Boris Johnson's prime ministership. The rules of the party, Conservative Party, are quite arcane on this in terms of how many months should take place, etc., etc. Whether, if enough resignations take place, will he be forced to quit? Big question again. Who will be the next prime minister? No clarity. There are a variety of uninspiring choices as far as the British public is concerned. Nothing radical, nothing that could actually take the crisis head on. So, although it looks like in some senses, like I said, the party collapsing on itself, it's actually, unfortunately, like we talk about, this is of relevance to the entire world because the policies of the country, like the United Kingdom, do tend to have an outsized effect despite its small population. So, this really is a difficult moment for the government, of course. Whether it will continue, big question. Unlikely that there's going to be, the Prime Minister may even try to call fresh elections or whatever, but unlikely that the party will support it. So we need to see what's really going to happen in the next couple of days. Until then, of course, a lot of drama, a lot of name calling here and there, a lot of people claiming to be holier than thou, and that's all par for the course in politics.
Yeah. Keir Starmer, of course, has used some strong language in the wake of these resignations, and it's a great time in theory for Labour to kind of fill this void, the bankruptcy that you were referring to. But does Labour in the UK currently have the program or the leadership to kind of jump in and change the trajectory that that country is on?
No, short answer definitely is no, because Keir Starmer and the Labour Party in general have sort of, and the Labour leadership at least, they've sort of tried to silence, neutralize the more radical sections of the party. We know that Jeremy Corbyn has been, who brought about a resurgence of the Labour Party, brought a lot of young people into it, brought issues of livelihood, issues of labour to the forefront, sidelined along with a lot of his supporters. A very anodyne centrist leadership is now in power in the Labour Party. Now, they're of course taking a strong stand on this because they smell the blood, so to speak. They sense a conservative party which is, and all this sort of affects the party's reputation among voters also. They see the party as unreliable. So this is even a boost to Labour, but in reality, in terms of policies, Labour has nothing to offer. We have talked about this multiple times on the show. During the recent RMT strike by railway workers, Keir Starmer had warned his MPs against showing solidarity with the striking workers, saying that they would be punished if they went to the picket lines. So this is the kind of opposition you have in the country. An opposition, despite being named Labour, is not even willing to stand with striking workers. So there's nothing really to expect much from the Labour Party when it comes to an alternative set of policies, and there's no easy way to the government for them also. So because last time they were considerably defeated in even some of their strongholds. So it's going to be quite a long time before they're really in a position to retake some of those strongholds as well. They do, recent polls have shown them having a leadership, they're having a lead over the Conservative Party, but that's because of all this crisis as well. We don't know what happens if a fresh election takes place, if fresh faces come to power. So unfortunately, people of the UK really kind of stuck between two parties which don't really have much to offer from each other. We know that, like I said, a variety of reasons causing a kind of extreme difficult situation for the people, not only in the UK, this is common across Europe, by the way. Also because the very problematic policies that these European countries have taken when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. So that has also contributed. And there's no real, there's no real solution for any of these governments. So any of these governments are political parties. So they're just continuing to ratchet up the rhetoric, trying to blame somebody else, trying to point fingers at each other. And what we're going to see is definitely a lot of months of unrest coming up in the continent as a whole, in the UK as well. So difficult time, of course, difficult time for the workers, for instance, many of whom are asking for at least basic pay rises to keep up with the inflation, which governments are unwilling to give. Whereas for instance, Boris Johnson's new appointment, the appointee as a chancellor, has said that he's definitely going to go for tax cuts. So that's really what's on the menu as far as both sections are concerned. And I don't think Keir Starmer really has any agenda of diverging from the broad policy framework that the Conservatives have followed. Both parties have kept to it. It's pretty much the same as the United States.
All right. Thanks very much for that update, Prashant. And of course, we'll keep tracking that story. But moving on now to a positive bit of news coming in from Colombia, where the president-elect, Gustavo Petro, has proposed a bilateral ceasefire with the National Liberation Army, or the ELN, rekindling a stalled peace process and igniting hope of a proper end to war in the Latin American nation. The ELN is the last major rebel group that's active in the country, and unlike FARC, did not lay down its weapons under the 2016 peace agreement. According to the Colombian military, the ELN currently counts about 2,500 fighters among its ranks and has extensive support networks, particularly along the border with Venezuela and the Pacific coast. I spoke earlier to Zoe for more on this story. Zoe, good to see you as always. What is the latest coming out of Colombia? Signs of a real lasting peace?
Definitely. One of the campaign promises of the historic PAC ticket of Gustavo Petro and Francia Marquez was that they were going to put peace back on the table. This is something that was completely abandoned by the government of Ivan Duque. Under his presidency, not only were the peace agreements that were signed in 2016 between the national government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, completely undermined, defunded, and almost disregarded. But the peace process with the National Liberation Army, ELN, was also abandoned completely. And so, the peace that Colombians have been urging and wanting so much had basically been thrown under the bus. There were no concrete advances, and there were actually setbacks in the peace process in the country. And so Gustavo Petro, Francia Marquez really highlighted and underlined the importance of retaking not only the peace agreements that were already signed, but also the peace process with the ELN. And in a recent interview that Gustavo Petro did with W Radio, which was his first interview as a president-elect of the country with a national radio station. He highlighted and reiterated that he is going to re-begin the peace process with the ELN. The ELN has also manifested its willingness to have a bilateral ceasefire, to re-engage in talks. And this is crucial for the country. Colombia has been suffering under an armed conflict for over 6 decades. And this means that the entire society has really been shaped by this conflict, displacement, assassinations. And so many in Colombia are saying that they're ready for peace. They want peace to happen, and they want peace with social justice. So not just the demobilization of armed groups in the country, but really a peace process that brings social justice to the people. For example, many demobilized ex-combatants of the FARC have been assassinated in recent years. There are over 300 who have been assassinated. And so they're saying, we don't want peace where there's going to be people who have put faith in the peace process to be then later assassinated. So there's so many levels to what peace really means. And it seems like Petro and Marquez are going to take this more seriously, and they're going to take concrete steps to make this happen in the country, which is definitely a breath of fresh air for the Colombian people and a step in the right direction.
Another, I guess, noteworthy aspect of that interview was the mention of re-establishing ties with neighboring Venezuela. A little more on that, Zoe?
Definitely. So as we've highlighted in our coverage of both Venezuela and Colombia, Colombia has been one of the key partners of U.S. imperialism in the war against Venezuela, not only serving as a training ground for example, paramilitaries who have later gone into the country to carry out assassination attempts, amongst other things, but also in the diplomatic siege against Venezuela and supporting the unilateral coercive measures against the country. This has meant that it's had a very, very tense relationship, and the border has been closed for many years between the two countries. There's a lot of issues between two countries that really have their roots shared as being both liberated by Simón Bolívar, that have this shared history together. But in recent years, because of these tensions, because of this antagonism of Colombia against Venezuela, have had very fraught relationships. And so, again, one of the campaign promises of Petro and Marquez was precisely to retake these relationships, to open the border between the two countries, to begin talks, to deal with the issues between them. One of the key demands of the Venezuelan government is that its agro-industrial company, Monomeros, which is a fertilizer company which had been seized due to the sanctions, that they be given back to Venezuela, that they be able to have this company, that Colombia not over comply with the US sanctions. And so these are all topics on the table. It's crucial for these countries to have dialogue. There's a lot of shared history, as I mentioned, but also in the recent wave of migration from Venezuela to many other countries provoked by this economic crisis, thousands of people have migrated from Venezuela to Colombia. There's over 4 million Colombians in Venezuela. These two countries need to have relationships, they need to have ties, and a stronger region is possible if there is cooperation between the two countries. So this is also a very positive step for both Colombia, for Venezuela. It means a decreasing of regional tensions and really a prosperous future for both people.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that important and hopeful update, Zoe.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, and finally, in what is being called a landmark move, New Zealand's women cricketers will earn the same match fees as the men under a new 5-year deal struck between New Zealand Cricket, the 6 major domestic associations in that country, and the New Zealand Cricket Players Association, meaning a substantial pay boost at both international and domestic levels for the women. It's the first time the men's and women's professional game have been combined under one master agreement. Leslie Xavier of NewsClick sports editor, is with us in studio to tell us more about this story. Leslie, first up, what are the details of the new deal and why is it sort of a landmark?
It is landmark because we are talking about on a given day, a given match, the same match fee for both sets of players, for the men as well as the women. And it is also landmark because the deal is made for all levels of cricket in New Zealand, all levels of contracted cricket. That means at the national level, the international cricket that happens, these players, and also at the domestic level, the various competitions, including their long format competitions as well as the T20I leagues that happen over there. So, in this regard, and also along with this, the other benefits that were there contractually with the for the women players, including maternity benefits, etc. It also is included into the deal, and so it's a wholesome complete package where something very important has been addressed, which is looking at the larger development of the game for both sides, men as well as women. And in New Zealand cricket, I will just add this fact also. So this kind of a change in approach has happened because there has been an attempt to structurally change the way New Zealand Cricket Board is leadership is. So there is a 8-member board which is at the helm of New Zealand Cricket Board, and it is 4 men and 4 women. And the president and vice president of the New Zealand Cricket Board are women. So then we can imagine how things have shaped towards reaching where it is.
Right.
Yeah, I understand that it's a smaller sport. It's a, I mean, cricket as in that sense is not the first sport in New Zealand. It's rugby, and also football is also big, being a global sport.
Yeah.
But the New Zealand women's football team have also instituted equal pay for both the men and the women. So in that sense, the country itself, the society, the sporting bodies, I would say slowly and gradually are trying to mirror the societal values that they are trying to put in place. Of course, there is pay disparity in the society, various professions, and there are certain women are confined to certain roles in certain professions, etc. But things are changing, and cricket has taken a right step forward toward that. So,
in the broader context, Leslie, of course, like you mentioned, it's a small sport in a small country, so perhaps it's easier for New Zealand to institute kind of these wide changes. But this sets a template, or at least gives us a way in which other countries and other sport can also look at establishing values of equal pay for equal work.
Just to get before getting into it, I'll just to also clarify that the men stand to earn more per annum because they play more.
Yeah.
So we are talking about match fee. So in that sense, just to clarify that.
If you play 10 games, you get paid for 10 matches. If you play 5, you get paid for 5. Yeah.
Now I'll just want to get back to the US national women's team, the world champions, and when they won the 2015 World Cup, and the total prize earnings that they had were substantially less than the US national team,
which didn't qualify for the
World Cup. So, so that's the disparity that we are talking about. And also another statistic that I would like to point out is 2017 in the top 100 sports earners list that is put out by Forbes, no women were there. And we are talking about a sporting world where we have some amazing names. I mean, both in individual.
Not even Serena Williams.
Not even Serena Williams. So you can imagine the kind of disparity that even a player of Williams's stature faces. Things are changing. I mean, tennis world, in that sense, they have instituted. I mean, all the Grand Slams have instituted equal prize money for both men and women. But in a country like US, the national team, the women's national team, who are the best team in the world, they have to fight a court case to achieve that equal stances. So there are various layers to why this is not happening. First and foremost, like I mentioned in the case of New Zealand, it was made possible because there was a structural change at the helm. So last year when Tokyo Olympics was happening, there was, I mean, Japan is one country where there is a huge gender disparity in the professional sphere, and that was reflecting in the organizing committee till they made some changes, and I mean, a few former athletes were incorporated into the system. To
change the optics.
Optics, exactly. So that optics, I mean, it was clearly a cosmetic thing, but that didn't change anything as such. But in national bodies, in sporting bodies, when these changes happen, maybe immediately for optics, but in the larger run, perspectives will be added and things would change. So New Zealand, in that sense, have set a template that can be emulated by other countries. And even in sport like tennis and all that, they have instituted that In football, when you look at the women's national teams, Australia have done that, Norway have done that. So we have certain countries who have been pioneers, and the other countries are looking at it. In cricket specifically, when we look at it, the richest board in the world is India, but the pay disparity is huge. The a female player, a woman in the senior national team earns slightly less than the under-19 team player. That is the disparity that we are talking about. So the entire, I mean, there's a lot of change that needs to happen to reach where it ideally should be, but it's moving in the right direction.
Step, yeah. And I think a key factor also, whether it's the case of United States soccer or in this case cricket in New Zealand, is that in the negotiations, it's been a collective bargaining effort.
Yeah.
So players, associations, unions have played a major role in it. And it's that collective voice that has put pressure on these bodies also to institute these changes. All right. Thanks very much, Leslie. That's all the time we have today. And with that, we also bring our show to a wrap from Leslie, myself, and the entire People's Dispatch team. Thank you very much for watching Daily Debrief. For more on these stories as well as everything else that we cover, you can head to our website, as always, peoplesdispatch.org, and give us a follow on the social media platform of your choice. We'll, of course, be back tomorrow with another episode. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.